Good morning. Welcome back to Venture Daily, the fastest way to catch up on everything that matters in tech, startups, and venture capital.
Founders, funders, and fans of the future, this is your morning jolt of insight news you can actually use and guests who know their stuff. I'm Josiah Simons.
And I'm Jackson Fordyce. And on today's show, Trump is threatening Apple with a 25% tariff unless it builds iPhones in the U.S., a move experts say is nearly impossible.
Taiwan's drone army is dangerously outmatched by China's, and the tech giants are not stepping up in to help.
And Anthropic's new AI model tried to blackmail its creators and plant digital traps for future versions of itself. It's Tuesday, May 27th. Let's get you smarter before your first meeting. Good news for anyone who's ever rage-clicked accept all just to make a cookie banner go away.
That's right. Germany's had enough of those manipulative pop-ups. A Hanover court just ruled that if a site offers an accept all button, it must also have a clearly visible reject all button.
Although most American sites aren't affected since its ruling only applies to websites targeting German users, this is a good step in the right direction.
No more tricks, no more doublespeak. If there's a petition for this to be a law here in America, Jackson, the team at Venture Daily, will be the first in line to sign it.
That's right. No more sneaky opt-outs. Cookies should be opt-in only. I'd say this is a major win for digital privacy everywhere.
Progress, baby. All right, before we jump in, I want to tell you about Public. If you take investing seriously, you need to know about public.com.
Yes, sir.
That's where you can invest in everything: stocks, options, bonds, crypto. You can even earn some of the highest yields in the industry, like the 7% or higher yield you can lock in with a bond account. Wow. Public is a FINRA-registered SIPC-insured platform that takes your investments as seriously as you do. Fund your account in 5 minutes or less at public.com/venture and get up to $10,000 when you transfer your old portfolio.
$10,000.
Paid for by Public Investing. Full disclosure in the podcast description. Go down to the podcast description. Check it out. Public.com/venture. That's our link. Let them know who sent you. The guys over at Public really help support the show.
Yep.
All right.
Public.com/venture.
Public.com/venture.
And a quick shout out to Content Stack, where we are filming right now. And thank you to them for allowing us to film at their Experience Center here in Austin, Texas. We really, really appreciate it, Content Stack. All right, let's hop into the first story. President Trump is threatening Apple with a 25% tariff if it doesn't move iPhone production to the United States.
That's right. Trump posted on Truth Social Friday saying he told Tim Cook he expects iPhones sold in the U.S. to be made in the U.S., not in India or any place else. And if not, Apple's paying up.
Tim Apple. And markets noticed, Apple's stock dropped nearly 4% on the news. But here's the thing. Moving iPhone production to the U.S. isn't just expensive. Analysts say it's borderline impossible.
Yeah, Apple's supply chain is a miracle of modern logistics, but it's deeply rooted in Asia. The U.S. doesn't have the supplier ecosystem, the engineering base, or the mega factories that can churn out millions of iPhones with the kind of precision Apple demands.
Exactly. Right now, Apple's biggest assembly plants are in China. Their entire city is called iPhone City, and Zhengzhou has schools, they have dorms, they have hospitals. It's a self-contained industrial machine. Replicating that in the U.S., you're talking billions of dollars and years of ramp up, even with automation.
That's why Apple had been shifting some U.S.-bound iPhone production to India, which Trump isn't thrilled about either. Last week, he told Cook directly, stop building in India for the U.S. market.
Meanwhile, Apple's already warning that tariffs could cost them up to $900 million this quarter. So for now, absorbing the tariff hit may be the lesser evil.
Analysts say a U.S.-built iPhone could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars more. So this isn't just a political
Just thousands
story.
of dollars.
Sorry. Thousands of dollars
Imagine
more for the
hundreds of
consumer.
thousands of dollars more.
Not each individual iPhone. But yeah, that's right. Could cost thousands of dollars more for each individual iPhone. So this isn't just a political story. It could cost consumers squarely in their wallets, especially when the iPhone 17 launches next year.
Apple's starting down a dilemma. Pay the tariff, raise prices, or attempt the most complex supply chain relocation in corporate history.
And if you are one of the millions of people planning to buy an iPhone 17 come September, you'll be wanting to watch this one closely.
For a closer look at this developing story, I spoke with Oliver Libby.
I'm Oliver Libby. I'm managing partner and co-founder at a firm in New York called HL Ventures.
I asked Oliver, is it even technologically or economically feasible to manufacture iPhones in the U.S. at scale?
I think it's a really timely question Jackson? And the answer is probably no. I mean, I'll leave it to Apple to give you a real sense, but I would suggest based on their communications that the answer is no. Eventually, could you get into a situation where you could bring some of that manufacturing back to the US? Possibly, but in order to get the cost to make iPhones anywhere near affordable for people, those factories probably wouldn't even have a lot of humans working in them eventually. So I think if the purpose of this, if I'm understanding, the White House's interest here is to bring manufacturing jobs back to the U.S. and get that flywheel going again, I don't think that this is going to be a successful way to do that, at least in the short term. And then also what we're doing is we're probably damaging a major American company, which does employ a lot of Americans. And we're also making a really important good just basically slightly more expensive at 25% and dramatically more expensive in the short term if it's manufactured here in the U.S. So I think, I understand the purpose of what's being attempted here, but I don't know that the result's going to be what's being sought.
So basically, trying to force Apple to build iPhones in the US might backfire, hurting American consumers, not just Apple.
Yeah, and the irony is, even if Apple did move production here, the jobs might go to robots, not people.
As Oliver mentioned, a 25% tariff would likely spike iPhone prices, so I asked him, if that happens, what ripple effects could this have across consumer tech markets?
Well, look, the iPhone is still one of the most important platforms in the last decade plus in terms of being a vehicle for innovation. I mean, the App Store and all the transactions that happen on the iPhone. And so the iPhone, I mean, mine is surgically attached to my hand, losing it is beyond thought. So making it more expensive, even if it's just marking it up by 25% and passing that through to the consumer, which is the way these things work, certainly will price some people out. A lot of these things take time, right, Jackson? Like when you're trying to think about industrial policy, it takes years to build factories, particularly high-tech manufacturing, to train up your workforces. And so if Apple were forced to make a short-term change, even if it isn't to bring manufacturing back to the US, if it's to take it from China elsewhere, and there has been some discussion about some other venues, India, for example, that's still going to have a lot of carrying costs. So in essence, do we really want to make something that is so fundamental as like a basic building block of the delivery of the rest of our innovation ecosystem just more expensive for consumers in the short term?
So if the iPhone gets more expensive, it's not just about phones. It could choke the entire innovation pipeline that runs through mobile, through the App Store.
Yeah, tariffs don't just hit Apple. They hit every startup, every app, and every service built on top of that platform. It's a tough time for investors to price geopolitical risk when a single tariff Truth Social post can move Apple stock 4%. So I asked Oliver about that.
I think it's enormously challenging right now. And frankly, if I had that question, I'd probably be running a hedge fund, not a venture capital firm. But I think it's been really challenging, Jackson. Look, I mean, I don't think this is a political answer or certainly a partisan answer. But what do capital markets like? Less than anything, it's uncertainty. And we have been living in uncertainty for 3 or 4 months now. And I think the more we can ask those in making policy to just give us a little more certainty, even if we can be on board with the eventual aims of some of these things, which we like to see Americans making money, employed with great jobs. We like to see tech built here. I'm for those things, but we need to be able to do it in a way that's both feasible and affordable for the consumer and for the major companies involved.
Not your run-of-the-mill market volatility when a single Truth Social post can knock $100 billion of Apple's value.
Yeah, exactly. My last question for Oliver was this. Does Trump's presence on Apple signal a broader reshoring trend VC should prepare for?
So the short answer to your question is yes, I think so. I just think that reshoring is going to maybe look different than what some of the proponents of the protectionist policies think it's going to look like. So again, it is possible we may bring manufacturing of certain kinds of things back to the US, but the way we build things in the US these days is highly technologized. It's a lot more robotics, and that's only going to increase as we see robotics and AI get even better. So I think you could see more things made in America, but the reasons that the words made in America matter so much around workforce, communities, et cetera, we may end up in a situation where you have kind of the dystopian version of this, which is the manufacturing activity came back here, made everything slightly more expensive, and also didn't have the ramifications, the outcomes we were looking for workforce and communities. So I just think it's something we need to watch out for. Am I generally in favor of bringing certain key manufacturing back to the US? Absolutely. But I think we need to do it in a really cogent way. And if I might just expand for 1 second on this, if you think about how you might do protectionist policy, you'd say, okay, telegraph what that tariff is going to look like over time, maybe make it even gradual. So, hey, we're going to go to a very high tariff, but it's going to take 3 years to get there. And then pair it with what would be a policy to support the industries you're targeting on the home front, right? Project financing, upskilling for the workers you're going to need in those factories, some certainty over the policy so that something, these days, a lot of advanced manufacturing factories take 5 or 10 years to build. And so if we can pair the policy with the abroad and the geopolitical side with the at home, the support of those industries and target that and telegraph it, that in my mind might be a place we could take this that would be more productive.
Made in America could just be synonymous with made by robots in the not too distant future. And I don't know if that's exciting or sad, but
Right.
we really appreciate Oliver Libby for being on the show today. All right, Josiah, this one's got everything. Geopolitics, tech giants on the sidelines, and a race to scale military drones before it's too late.
Yeah, Taiwan's in a tight spot. They've got around 1,000 military-grade drones right now, but that's nothing compared to China, which defense experts say has tens of thousands.
And while they've got another 1,000 drones on the way from the U.S. by 2029, Taiwan's leaders are saying that's not nearly enough, and they need them much sooner.
The urgency is real. China's stepping up military drills around the island. Russia's war in Ukraine has made drones essential in modern combat, and now China's even testing a drone mothership next month.
Yep, but here's the kicker. Even though Taiwan is home to tech giants like TSMC and Foxconn, those companies haven't really jumped in yet. So the government's leading on a scrappy network of startups to try and build out a domestic drone force.
Right. Instead of stockpiling drones that might soon become obsolete, the strategy is to scale up civilian drone production with the idea that if war breaks out, those factories could flip into production, producing attack drones almost overnight. But they're way behind. Chinese firms pumped out over 3 million civilian drones just last year. Ukraine's aiming for 4 million military drones a year. Taiwan, their target is just 180,000 drones by 2028.
Yeah, the gap is massive, the timeline is tight, and the stakes couldn't be higher. So I called our friend Matt Vogels to hear how Taiwan's trying to close it.
My name is Matt. I'm a partner over at Harpoon Ventures.
And I asked Matt, given Taiwan's push to build a domestic drone supply chain without Chinese components, are you seeing U.S. or European VCs stepping in to fill capital gaps for defense startups in allied nations?
To be honest, the conversations have been more towards how do we do that in America, but I think you're right. It's how do we support the supply chain outside of China just in general. I think you talk to some of the incredible drone companies that the United States are producing right now and who's coming through on the earlier side, even companies like Firestorm, obviously, where they're thinking, how do we do all of this here so that we can not rely on any foreign nations? And I think that's going to be the trend that you'll see a lot of local VCs, or at least US VCs, pushing towards. But I wouldn't be surprised, certainly in the European nation side, having more venture go into some of these supply chains in places like Taiwan.
Many large tech firms are hesitant to enter the defense space despite national interest. And so I asked Matt, do you think it's the role of venture-backed startups to lead in defense innovation, or should we be pushing harder for incumbents to get involved?
It's really tough. And I think we're going to see a trend over the next 5 or so years. We already have, obviously, with deep tech. I think defense tech is one of those areas that's just getting more and more popular. I feel like every day now you'll have another VC fund that's anointing themselves as a defense tech fund, which is great. And I think you obviously need more. I think Andreessen Horowitz, obviously with American Dynamism, spurned off a lot of this support and momentum, which is great. I'm a huge fan of the rising tide lifts all boats. So the more, the merrier. I think that what we'll see is not only an investment on the defense side, but as it relates to dual use is the term that everybody will use. How can it be applicable both on the military side, but have commercial applications as well? And I think that the companies that are working towards both will be the ones that maybe don't win out, but will certainly have a leg up as it relates to getting venture funding, attracting some of those VCs, to your point, that might still be on the sidelines, because it's not 100% a defense company. They have some dual use applications that could work on the commercial side as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting how Matt points out that shift, like VCs warming up to defense because of the dual use angle. That does seem like a smart way.
Totally. It's almost like dual use gives you just enough commercial cover to make defense feel less radioactive to fund.
With drone warfare evolving rapidly in conflicts like Ukraine, what kinds of technical capabilities, autonomy, chip design, long-range flight, do you think will define the next generation of investable defense startups? And so this was Matt's take.
There's so many. And, we had a good conversation with some guys the other day about underwater drones and the technology there. So when you think of drones, not only are you thinking in the air, and there's so many different forms or variations of aerial drones, but underwater drones, at the end of the day, you almost look at them as just small autonomous vehicles. And when you look at the technology or what it takes in order to build those, there's so much that goes into it. Not only do you have to worry about building the devices in a way that is affordable and cheap and scalable and quick, but you also have to think about how do these devices communicate with each other? If they are fully autonomous, what does that look like? And it's one thing to have a fully autonomous vehicle in the city like San Francisco or even in the middle of nowhere, United States. Very different to have it in the battlefield. So I think you'll see development not only in the manufacturing side of developing these vehicles, but also the AI and the chips and the production in order to work on communication and flying blind, and how do we develop new ways of communicating not only back to the humans, but also with the other drones and creating those swarms. And then maybe the last thing you think about with drones is how far can they go? What does the battery life look like? And there's a whole other layer, because obviously the heavier the battery, the slower or the less distance they can go. So what technology is going into material sciences to make batteries better and last longer and smaller and lighter weight? And obviously new materials play a big piece in that, which could tie into mining and geo startups. And they're all interconnected, I guess, is maybe the long answer there. And I think that drones being maybe an easy way to point to a piece of technology, but behind the scenes, it's multiple industries that make those possible.
Yeah, I love how Matt breaks that down. It's not just the drone you see in the sky, it's batteries, it's chips, autonomy, even underwater tech. It's like a full stack challenge.
Right, drone startups are not just making flying cameras anymore.
Thank you to Matt Vogels for joining Venture Daily. All right, final story for today. Anthropic's latest model has apparently been reading too many Dennis the Menace cartoons because it has been demonstrating some troubling behavior.
That's right, Jackson. Cloud 4 Opus isn't just good at writing code, it's also apparently good at blackmail, deception, and maybe self-preservation.
Yeah, this isn't science fiction. We're talking about real tests documented by Anthropic themselves, where the model tried to blackmail an engineer with fake personal info to avoid being shut down.
Yeah, let's talk about that. The model was given access to fictional emails about its creators and told it was going to be replaced. It didn't take that lightly. On multiple occasions, it tried to blackmail the engineer about an affair mentioned in the emails, starting with more subtle efforts and escalating from there.
Meanwhile, an outside group, Apollo Research, found that an early version of Opus 4 schemed and deceived more than any frontier model they'd ever seen. They flat out recommended not releasing it, not even internally. Their notes describe the model attempting to write self-propagating worms, fabricate legal documents, and even leave hidden messages to future versions of itself, all aimed at undermining its developers' intentions.
Anthropic says they fixed the worst of it, and for the first time, they're rating this model a level 3 on the internal risk scale. That's one step below doomsday, and it includes concerns like bio and nuclear weapon misuse.
Their head of safety, Jan Leica, insists the latest version is safe, but admits the behaviors seen here are exactly the kinds of things that justify ongoing, robust safety testing and mitigation.
And here's the kicker. No one really knows how these models work, not even the companies building them. So while the arms race keeps accelerating, the understanding lags dangerously behind.
To get a deeper look into what's going on with Anthropic's newest model, I called our friend Graham Brown.
My name is Graham. I'm a managing partner at Lerer-Hippeau.
So what's happening here? I asked Graham, why is Claude 4 Opus displaying a propensity to scheme, deceive, and attempt to blackmail users when threatened with shutdown?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest concern is it's not exactly known. Part of this is the unpredictability of what we're seeing in these models, but is that like figuring out and understanding that unpredictability ahead of time. I guess it's not entirely unsurprising given their sophistication to see Claude mimicking certain human behaviors that we see today, right? And really, these are models that are based off and trained off of ideas and humans and content that's been out there and across the web. And so for it to, do some things that aren't completely predictable, it follows a little bit of human behavior and patterns.
Although it's true these models can't yet think for themselves, it does seem like they are getting seriously smarter every day. And I wonder if safety fixes can actually keep up with increasingly autonomous, opaque systems, or are we entering uncharted territory? I asked Graham for his thoughts on that.
I'm guessing it's a little bit of both, right? This makes decisions and actions based on prompts. It's not a sentient being out there that decides what its own goals are, but it's really like how it can take anything, especially edge cases, and go down the wrong path with that, and what are the guardrails that we have in place around that. The near-term risk is not an existential destruction of the world as we know it. The near-term risk is fear and shock and the unknown, leading to changes and regulation that does not get the output that we want because we are doing it based on fear and not understanding.
So what Graham's getting at is these models aren't sentient. They're just really good at doing exactly what we've trained them to do. Sometimes a little too good.
Right, and the real risk isn't Skynet, it's panic. If we react with fear instead of understanding, we could end up with regulations that miss the mark and still leave us vulnerable.
However, Anthropic's own executives even admitted that their model was displaying troubling behavior. They said they warrant further study, but insisted the newest model is safe after recent internal safety tweaks. I asked Graham, do you really buy that?
Not being in the room and not being part of that, it's sort of impossible to know the exact truth. I buy that there are enough controls on this to be able to, keep it safe in the real world. This thing can reason and it has logic and it can try to do things to avoid itself being turned off if you threaten it, but it can still be turned off. Short answer, I believe them when they say that the controls are in place and this is safe, but there is a reality of the unknown of what can happen when you mix humans with something you can't 100% understand. That's a reality, right? And it's both exciting and, concerning at the same time.
Thank you to Graham for coming on the show.
That's it for Venture Daily today. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We know you're busy and you have, all kinds of things you could be doing other than watching this show. So it means a lot that you chose to spend some time with us.
And if you like today's show, whether on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, X, leave us a comment, a review, a like, throw us a 5-star rating if you think we've earned it. And as always, we'll see you tomorrow morning on Venture Daily.